All right. We're live, folks. We're live. It's been a long time for sure. I don't know how long it's been actually, but it's definitely been a while since me and Tim have had a conversation. But I figured it's now is just as good as time as any, especially with all the craziness and insanity that's going on. And maybe before we actually get
Oh,
into
yeah.
that, which there's lots of, maybe we'll just do a little catching up. But how you been, anyways, Tim? How's everything going?
I'm going good. I've just been kind of laying low, living life as a normie for a while. I'm even on my union executive, which, trying to work some influence from the inside to break Alberta's monopoly on healthcare,
Mm,
decentralize it, break it up. It seems like there's an opportunity in Alberta for that right now under Danielle Smith.
mm,
I think the UCP and Danielle Smith have the same goals as I do, maybe not complete free
yeah,
market healthcare, but at least going in the right direction, breaking things up.
yeah.
And certainly my fire department and my union want to see a breakup because working under Alberta Health Services as a paramedic is just atrocious. So yeah, we're trying. Your boy's trying to be an insider here for a change and try to influence things. Working all the angles. I tried from the outside for years. Now I'm
Yeah.
trying from the inside to see how it's going to work. I could talk about some of the frustrations and challenges working from the inside, but yeah, that's where I'm at. Just trying to be a normie, focus on my family. We bought a lake lot and we've been enjoying some time
Oh,
out
nice.
there. And, your boy's thinking about going deep into debt and buying a boat and just,
Ooh.
riding out this Keynesian wave of cheap money for as long as I can before apocalypse besets us. And
Oh, we're all Keynesians now, right? I mean, we have no
yeah,
choice in the matter, right? But no, that's
yeah,
awesome, actually. And now that you mentioned actually the whole healthcare system, I'm glad you actually brought that up because yeah, you're not just a firefighter, and great for that. Like that's a great thing that you do there, Tim. But you're also a paramedic, and I believe your daughters are as well, right? So yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So anyways, as far as that goes, what are the whole? I haven't. I know it's the report came out, but what are your thoughts on it? I haven't really gotten right entrenched into reading the whole thing, but are you familiar with the whole thing with the UCP and the COVID, busting some of that wide open and how that's
Yeah,
all?
yeah. Well, there was a review in Alberta recently, and I haven't read it. I've just briefly skimmed it. But it was by Dr. Davidson, who was the head of ER in Red Deer, a central Alberta city, and he headed up this task force that was just their job was to review the government's COVID response and come up with recommendations about what they did right, what they did wrong, or what further action should be taken. And he just ran into all sorts of issues. I mean, just getting data from AHS, and it seemed like everyone at AHS had a gag order, and the few that showed up
Mhm.
to talk about why they did the things they did, why they made the decisions they did, basically we're reading off the same exact talking points. I think one of the findings of the review is that they're asking for they recommended an actual inquiry where now you're going
Mm.
to subpoena people and you're actually going to have to
Oh,
testify and
really?
tell the truth about what's going on. And so hopefully something comes of that inquiry. I mean, it all seems kind of like a waste to me. It's like if you're a libertarian, you could have said right from the outset that this response was all wrong. But one of the things I found interesting in the review is that I believe they showed that the all death mortality in the non-vaccinated, or actually no, uh, all death mortality, the mortality rate from the mandates and lockdowns themselves was higher than the mortality
Mm.
rate for COVID. So
Mm.
I thought that was interesting. And it seems like there's more and more doctors in Alberta that are kind of finding the courage to speak out. I was surprised that this doctor, I'd never heard of him before. You heard of the guys like Dr. Makis or whatever. And
Yeah,
there's a
yeah.
few famous kind of first mover docs that spoke out against a lot of this stuff. But
Right.
now just some kind of run of the mill entrenched ER docs who are well established in the AHS bureaucracy are speaking out against some of the things. So that's kind of encouraging to see.
Well, that's I guess that's the one thing that I guess we could expect and could be the positive thing about it, no matter what else comes out of it, is it at least giving people, that's the thing. People look to government as their source for, truth. And like, it's just such a weird thing anyways these days, but at least now, some of the stuff's coming light and it's giving people at least some reason to do some pushback, because it's not just them, screeching from nowhere. They're actually, now they have, documentation, they have some files, they have at least some evidence or something to kind of give themselves a reason and justify the pushback. And I tell you, for me, Tim, that's something. It's not like I think about it every day. Matter of fact, rarely do I think too much about the whole shit that went down during COVID. Probably because it would be a miserable fucking time living in it if I did, right? But
right.
It is something though. Is if we're going to get past, like, especially when they're talking about this Team fucking Canada shit these days, I mean, it's just so fucking insane to see these liberals in particular, right? Although I hate to even use that word for them, because really they're collectivists. They're not liberals by any stretch of the nation. But to see them now it's like that a fucking abusive I don't know, spouse or parent or something just beat the fuck out of you, and they're like, hey, we got to take a photo up, someone wants to take our picture. It's like, okay, you're a weirdo, man. You just beat the shit out of me. Now you're over here trying to like wrap your arms around me in warm embrace, right? Flag. Trudeau, I mean everyone's kind of bantered about it, but Trudeau himself, right? King fucking, progressive or collectivist himself, Canada's the first post-national state, right? We have no court. Now all of a sudden, like I say, they're tripping over themselves because they've wrapped them so much in the flag now. But meanwhile, when everyone was down at Ottawa and the flags were wall to wall down there at the Parliament building, everyone was like, the flag then was, it meant fascism, basically, right?
Yeah.
You were a white nationalist fascism if you waved the flag then. Maybe what are your thoughts on some of that craziness?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's pretty funny to see people walk back their terrible tyrannical opinions, right, and pretend like they never had them before. Like, I don't know, I waffle between optimism and cynicism. A lot of, like, even this COVID report review is like looking at things like mortality rates and was this virus, and I hear it, like, the arguments against the COVID lockdowns were always kind of dumb, right? The arguments against the lockdowns were, well, it's not that lethal and the vaccine is more dangerous, and all those things may be true, but those aren't reasons to oppose a lockdown. The lockdown ought to be opposed on principle, right? So what, if you tell me that the vaccine or the virus wasn't dangerous enough to lock down, then what you're telling me is that there would be a virus that would be dangerous enough that you would justify a lockdown. So at the end of the day, I just get kind of frustrated by the whole framing of the debate and the constant search for whose evil plan, and like just uncovering these truths and well,
listen, Jim, actually, let me ask you a question about that. Actually, sorry for interrupting, but I just, because I want to, is so because you're in the healthcare field, I'm just curious because of this, and you were saying how, and it seems to a lot of people moved on, is one of the side effects, now I don't even know, so that's why I'm asking you, but I'm just wondering, are Canadians, because we know a lot of Canadians are on those prescription medications, right? Is one of the side effects having real short-term memory? Is that or anything? Like
maybe.
No, but
well, it could be. Who knows? I don't know. Like, the thing is, my honest, and I was in the front line for all of this, and still I am, right? I didn't see all that many. I didn't see COVID as all that dangerous, and I didn't see the vaccine as all that dangerous either. Like, I just didn't see both sides were talking about, one side talking about how dangerous the virus is and chalking up every death to COVID, and the other side talking about how dangerous the vaccine is and chalking up every death to the vaccine. I just didn't see either of those things. I did see some fairly sick people with COVID. I saw some, I saw some, like at least one person die from the vaccine, but I honestly didn't see a lot on either side of the equation, and it was.
But your problem is, Tim, is you're honest about this, and you're not willing. Like, and this is
Maybe.
why we, like me and you, this is why we end up in the situation we're in, is because we're unwilling to join either tribe and say, yes, definitely all the vaccines.
Right.
Yeah, if you take a vaccine, you're going to explode in about 10 minutes.
Right.
I mean, think
yeah,
about.
And I mean, look, and maybe I'm biased here because, you know, like before the vaccine was available, I was like shaking my fist at the government for preventing us from getting the vaccine, right? Because it had to go through all these tests. Fuck you. I could test myself out, you know, and I was fighting that, you know, and I did see a couple of my coworkers get COVID pretty bad. And they, you know, they were short of breath for a few months. Like when it come to being physically, you know, it wasn't dangerous in the fact that they were never in any mortal danger, but they were get out of breath going upstairs. I mean, that's not good for a firefighter.
No,
they could, you know, one guy couldn't taste food for a couple months. I'm like, fuck that. I don't want that. I don't want to be short of breath, and I don't want to. So I'll roll the dice on this vaccine. Well, it turns out it didn't work, right? The vaccine, you know, so I didn't take any more. I'm like, okay, it wasn't as advertised, but also, you know, I'm not sure if I suffered any ill effect from it or not. Maybe I'm just blind. Maybe it'll rear its ugly head in 15 years.
Well, you know, Tim, though, for someone like yourself and taking the position and doing it in a nuanced and a principled way, like to me, and it's always stayed with me anyways, is it might not gain you friends from either side of the tribe or either tribe, right, of the both sides of the divide, but man, your credibility, and to me, the credibility, it's got to be what matters most, right? And you chose, you're like, okay, it'd be so easy to get lured over here or lured over here, but I'm standing here, I'm taking a principled stance, and like I say, that buildup of credibility, I think as we go forward in this mad world, that's going to be what people like you or I, that's about all we have left to offer, but it's very important, something to offer, right?
It's just, sorry, just one last thing. It's just, for me, it's about having independent thought, right? Like, you know, it's a good instinct to go exactly opposite to what the government is saying. But, you know, if the government tells you not to jump off a cliff, you shouldn't just jump off a cliff on principle, right? Like you should take government out of the equation, say, I don't care about whatever claims it's making. I'm going to evaluate this, you know, and keep that noise out of there, and think through the problem for yourself, not just knee-jerk react one way or the other, you know. And we saw that on both sides. Like on the one side, they were just like, whatever the government's selling us, we're buying. Just give me more of that. What is the news media telling me my opinion should be? That's my opinion now. And the other side was just going the exact opposite. Now that side was getting things more right, because it turns out that most of the things government was saying was bullshit. But every now and then, you know, a broke clock is right twice a day, right? So
Well, anyways, Tim, so kind of on springboard from that kind of moment of insanity, which lasted for almost 3 years. But the thing that I find so stark, and you just got to think that these kind of things, I don't know if they're happening in terms of conversation in households or communities or anything like, but it's just to watch how that collective delusion, that collective mindset, and that collective guilt and punishment, which I've talked about so many times in past videos myself and live streams. But you would think post-COVID, and even some of the people that, you know, maybe were late to the game and catching up to things, and I can understand that. Hey, a lot of Canadians they don't pay attention to shit. I would say that's the majority of Canadians. They just kind of tacitly, they get their information, maybe a friend or someone, and they, you know, skim a headline or something. But you would think after all is said and done, and I'm sure you've probably already seen this, that the collective delusion and the pretense of collective guilt and punishment, you know, the fact that they were to the point like 1 in 4 Canadians, I guess, were going to like, let's lock these unvaccinated fuckers up, right? But you would think after that, you know, and having a couple years of pause, right? But have you seen that 15-year-old girl down there at the Rogers Center, you know, singing the American anthem, getting the big, loud, like a room, you know, a stadium filled with tens of thousands of people booing this 15-year-old girl.
You
know, while she's singing, like that is like, to me, there's that collectivism, that fucking collective guilt and punishment rearing its ugly old head once again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've always struggled with national anthems. I can't help but view them as hymns to the state. Every now and then I get a patriotic vibe and be like, but
I'm not making a case for patriotism.
No, I know you're not. I know, but yeah, it is a sign of I guess you're right. Just collectivism, just surrendering your will to mob mentality and to whatever the mainstream media is selling. It just, it's programming. It's like people are walking around with automatons, like automatons, and just kind of whatever the media and whatever the algorithms on social media is telling them is how they're forming their opinion and how they're operating through life. And, I'm probably guilty of that too, to some degree, but, I try to guard myself against that. And, and understand that, that the algorithm is trying to manipulate me, right? It's trying to give me more of that which I believe in or what I want to believe to be true. And so I have to guard myself against constantly, sucking in information without a skeptical eye on, I cast a skeptical eye towards things I don't want to be true, but I have no skepticism whatsoever towards things I do want to be true. Right. And so I have to guard myself against that too, because I've held wrong opinions before, and I probably have some now. So,
oh yeah, that's bound to happen. It's this thing called being human, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no. Well, like I say, the big thing to me is, I can even, that's the thing. I like to think about these things. I could even see, although I would never agree, I think it's foolish, but I can see, like, if you were even a representative of Trump or his party, or, anything along those lines, or someone in a position of authority from the US, trade represent, I could totally see that, where the madness of the crowd would be quite applicable. But how can you, like I say, this, surely you would think adults, and I would think most of them at these games would be mostly adults, I would think, but to see, like, it's a girl that, and 15, she's young, just to think, your first big event like that, take all the politics out of it. I'm just thinking, even myself as a 54-year-old man, that's stand in front of a crowd like that, and fucking try to sing. That would be, man, I'd be, probably be pissing my pants, to be honest. You know what I mean? Like, it'd be tough. So here's this girl in that position, and the crowd's like, okay, can't you reserve your angst or your TDS for fucking, like, it just seemed weird to do it under that scenario. It just fucking, it kind of made me sick, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? But anyways, I will just say this, shout out to the folks in the chat, and we'll probably get a chance here in a little bit to maybe say hi to some of you folks in the chat. But unless you have anything else you want to say about that, I wanted to bring something else out there, Tim. But did you have anything else you wanted to say about that?
No.
Okay. Because this is funny. Do you know who, I listen to CBC, and there's a guy on X here, and he goes by CBC Watcher. Shout out to CBC Watcher. You're like me. You take them for the team, so the rest of us don't have to, right? Yeah, you watch CBS so that the rest of the people don't have to put up with the nonsense. But oh wait, no, do I got the wrong one on here? Hold on here. I want to make sure I got. No, that's my own. Sorry, wrong one. I have two of these opened up. I got to open another one up here, Tim. All right. But anyway, so like I say, I watch the CBC. Where is it? There we go. And like I say, because I like to hear how these people think. To me, that's the big thing. I like to know, if I'm using it to try to somewhat, amateurly psychoanalyze this stuff. I want to know how these people are thinking. But so there's this lady. I don't know if you're familiar with her. Let me throw my glasses on here. And yeah, she does stuff. There's two of them, Brian Goldman, and this one is Iris Goldfinkel. She's an MD, and I'll just hover over her username here. It's I now post on Blue Sky. Well, of course. Anyways, family doctor, researcher, Prime Health Research, columnist. Anyways, and she's a contributor, as you can see, CBC Radio and Global News. Anyways, but I saw this, and like, this is an older woman. She's, an MD. Should be fairly intelligent. Should be at least somewhat, decent, understanding.
Can you read it for me? I can't quite see it.
Okay, yeah. So it says, it's now in my clinic. Nearly every patient I see struggles emotionally over how Canada is treated by the US. It's causing sleep disturbance, anxiety, and tremendous angst. It's going to be a very long 4 years. So I'll take it off. So you. But yeah. But I mean, these are the people that are like the thought leaders, and especially in particular, most of the ones that would be watching, obviously the CBC would typically skew to the older generation of this people. But my goodness, to hear, like, for me, it just to talk in such a term like that is if you care about your patients or the people who are seeing your practice, or people are even reading your tweet. I think that's the worst thing that you can be telling people, or reinforcing them that, Orange Man should be so, the very thought of him should be so bad that you're just shocked and put yourself into a PTSD type situation. But anyway, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing, it shouldn't surprise anyone that a physician is saying stuff like that, right? So notice that the locus of control here is on Trump. It's what Trump is doing to the patients. It's not a deficit of the patients not being able to tolerate what's going on with the news.
Yeah.
It's the news itself, right? That is the problem. It's the Orange Man. Nothing has changed about this person's life. Absolutely nothing.
No.
But yet they're going off on, so and this is something we noticed that I think has become abundant in the medical community. Like, people are starting to see physicians and the medical community for what it is, largely, right? It's like a front for big pharma, and big pharma doesn't want you to think that the locus of control is in yourself. You have a disease that's outside your control, and it requires the solution big pharma has to answer. Oh, the weight you're having, that's not your fault. It's not because you keep stuffing Twinkies down your gullet. It's you don't have the willpower to do that. You have a disease. You need Ozempic. Ozempic can fix that. And it's the same, like you're feeling sad all the time. You're feeling low energy. It's not because you have no purpose in life. It's not because you haven't set a direction for your life and are doing things meaningful and are thinking of things bigger than yourself and serving your community and serving a higher power. No, it's because you're short. Your body has a deficit of antidepressants in it. And we just need to get your antidepressant levels up, and then we'll fix that disease. You have a disease, you see, you don't have this is what the big pharma industry is geared towards. It's on making sure that you never feel like you're in control of your life, that the locus of control for your life is external to you, and that needs to be fixed. And then your life will be better. And it fits right in with woke mentality. Of course, people who feel like they're a victim constantly and feel like their life sucks because everything around them has conspired to make their life suck, are destined to continue sucking and destined to continue outsourcing their control to people who offer to fix things for them, so that they don't have to fix things for themselves.
Yeah. Well said.
And that position is right there. And, I have some sympathy for physicians, and like the system is set up so that you've got 7 minutes with your patient, or if you're, it's certainly in Canada, if you're spending longer than 10 minutes with your patient, you're losing money. Like you got to cover the cost of and you can only bill so much. It's set by the government. Everything is set by the government. And so you come in, you tell the physician your problem, he writes you a prescription. That's how it works right there. Right.
Yeah.
And, there's no real healing going on.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because I actually shared, I don't know if I'll find it. Maybe I'll just try to paraphrase it. I shared it actually earlier, but is that, I don't know who to even attribute to, but because I share a lot of stuff profusely still to this day. I got a problem, folks. But anyways, it was something along the lines is, people that talk about the healthcare, they say, we can't afford, health care. We can't afford doctors. We can't afford this. But somehow, I like how the quote was more or less, but yet we can afford all of those things plus the bureaucracy to implement it. So it's
right. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that to me, it just, and that's what I love about memes, or just short little phrases like that, because it really gets the mind to actually think about it in some way, in some regard. Because if you're complaining that, the reason why we need these socialist systems is because people can't afford this, you can't afford that in terms of the actual healthcare, but then you're adding that extra layer of bureaucracy on top, and we know how well, based on the release of all the files down there and the USAD, we know how expensive that can be when you get lots of pigs at the proverbial trough. So it's just a weird thing, and it just shows you that people haven't. It's so easy to break through that facade, but it tells you that there's a lot of people went through their whole life with not barely one person that they respected of having any intelligence that told them that, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I want you to know I'm skipping out on a healthcare engagement session in my community right now to join you on this podcast.
Oh shit.
And listen, I choose you over, consider it an early Valentine's gift, but but no, like these engagement sessions are all about how the state can run healthcare better, right?
Hmm.
And the fantasy I had was I was going to go there and ask
Is it like a
for
struggle session?
I don't know, but I was going to go there and ask for healthcare. I mean, my solution would be legalize healthcare, like end prohibitions on healthcare, and
Yeah.
and just see how that go. But I mean, I know at the end of the day it would have been pointless. So
Yeah.
save the
Yeah.
gas money and let's go on the Canadian Libertarian
Well,
podcast
I gotta
instead.
tell you, Tim, I'm really, really appreciative that you did choose to do that. But at the same time, hopefully it was just because of that. Because yeah, I definitely wouldn't want to pull away from, because I know the work that you do is very important. I putting all joke aside, really, I have a lot of respect, and that was the one thing that I think was very harmful through the COVID thing, especially with all the media bringing out all these healthcare experts. Is boy, did they ever destroy the trust in healthcare. And I can even give you an example of that myself. So I'm just recent a grandpa. My youngest son,
Oh, congratulations.
yeah, thanks, Tim. Thanks, man. It's fucking awesome. My first grandkid, and she's just so adorable. Anyways, but so he had, and even in terms of, so it was the first thing I think he said. And even my son, well, he obviously, I'm his dad, so he's kind of astute and pays attention to this stuff. But little things like why on day one, and maybe you can explain to me, is why did, like, it was weird they were pushing for, I can because once again, I'm not anti-vaccine. My son and his fiance both have their vaccines. They were even looked through their past schedules and trying to determine which ones that they want their, so that it's not that they're trying to not have vaccine, but they're trying which ones seem, but that's, I think that's something a lot of people today are in, is they don't even understand who they can trust. But it doesn't help when you bring out these experts and they're just constantly pushing and advocating for things for everybody, like a one size fits all approach. And the fact that they misled and lied to people, or things like even something like my son. So they basically, here's this little, baby, like freshly out of the womb, and she was actually premature, still turned out fine, like 6 pound 9, or yeah, around 6 pounds and stuff. Anyway, she's good, healthy size, even for having to be born a little bit early. But was the which one is it? I'm going to forget the name. The one for the sexually transmitted disease thing.
Oh,
What's it?
Gardasil. Yeah, for
No,
HPV.
no, it's a
It's a
babe. Do you know what I'm
vaccine.
trying to say? Oh, Titus B or whatever. What? Hepatitis B
Oh, hepatitis.
or hepatitis?
Yeah, there's hepatitis A, B, C.
Yeah, well, whatever. But from what I understand now, and maybe you can correct, but that it, and even actually it's funny because the lady that was there, she said, no, I wouldn't, like, kind of off to the side, said, no, you don't need that for your a newborn baby anyways.
Yeah.
But even something as simple as that, it's like, like and it wasn't like no one took them aside, did any big long explanation or thing, and stuff, little things like that, it makes people apprehensive. And I think that's the biggest thing that these people have done to the healthcare field. And by not questioning things, is now you've caused, and it wasn't just my son, like even the lady in there says, oh, trust me, now we're getting a lot of people who are very hesitant and causing them to be quite apprehensive. And that, I think, is the worst thing, because I can see now my son's reasonable, I'm reasonable, and luckily he's surrounded by a lot of other reasonable people. But you got to imagine there's a lot of Canadians out there who now, I mean, maybe are genuinely fully anti-vax now and might miss out on some things that they really, really could help them. But just by the sheer fact that for a one-size-fits-all approach, try to top-down approach to do that, as they cause so much distrust among the people in the healthcare community. Anyway, so what are your thoughts on some of that stuff there, Tim?
Yeah, well, when you were talking about it, I was reminded of one of the things I did as a teen, and that was go to my neighbors. My neighbor had like an industrial size chicken barn. They had like 20,000 chickens, and once a year he would have a vaccination day, right? And so we would go and we would just indiscriminately poke these chickens with 2 or 3 different needles, shots, and vaccinate them, right? To protect the herd, right?
Right.
And yes, a few of those chickens died. I mean, few of them they had a bad reaction. Few of them one shot was in the breast, and you push a little too hard, and there was complications to the vaccine.
Right.
We didn't
Right.
give a fuck. They were chickens. They were we were thinking about livestock management, herd management. We weren't thinking about the rights of that individual chicken. We weren't individually assessing each chicken and having a conversation with it, or like taking a lot of care about how we were treating this chicken, because we had a lot of chickens to get through. We had a big job to do, and that's how our healthcare approach reminds me. Like healthcare, when you understand that we are that the government is essentially tax farmers and we're tax livestock, things make a lot more sense. You just kind of go where the tax farmers tell you to go, and you show up and you do the thing, and you don't push back. Like the last thing you want is a chicken running around trying to escape, because now you have to go there, round them up. It's a lot more work. Just fucking comply. And the more you can get these chickens to comply, the easier your job is as a farmer, right? So you try to confine them in, you try to keep them in a pen. You don't let them go outside the confines, and you bat down very aggressively any dissent or anyone that goes outside the lines, right? And so that's, to me, how the best description I have for what's going on.
Well, sorry, actually, but that's perfect, Tim, because actually it kind of segues into kind of one of the other things that's front and center today. Is you're absolutely right. And it's like we are, although I like to use the term plantation, but either way, chicken coop, whatever, right? You're on and now that we're talking today, and I'm getting a lot of pushback from Canadians, and so are a lot of us. I got quite a few of the friends over on X that kind of share my views in terms of Trump's whole bantering about becoming the 51st state. Like, hey, listen, as far as it goes in terms of the plantations or the chicken coops of the world, right? It's like, damn, that one down there, especially the way like their document is written bare minimally, and the mindset, at the very least, the mindset. I see with my own eyes that there's still tens and tens of millions of Americans that still got that fight, that's still that respect for, individual liberty within them. And I keep saying that, I'm not typically the kind of guy, but hey, I'll raise the white flag any day if I can become part of that particular plantation, because at bare minimum, maybe some of my fellow chickens will start adopting some of that, more of a tough, resolved kind of a mindset, right? Maybe might rub off on them a little bit more. But anyway, what are your thoughts on this whole 51st state thing? Do you think it's real? Do you think it's just Trump doing Trump? Right? Hard to say, isn't it?
It's hard to say. I think it's, I look at Trump a little bit like an artist in a flow state, right? Like he's channeling something. I don't know if he's completely conscious of what he's channeling, but I think he puts out like by making these statements and believing in them, and selling them, he opens up all sorts of possibilities, right? All sorts of different ways this thing can go. And whether we become a 51st state, I kind of doubt that, but I could imagine, something like a more, I guess, a North America that has less trade barriers and is more
like an EU
economically interrelated, more like an EU kind of system. Maybe we adopt the same the US dollar, or who knows? I could see various things like that coming to pass. But and you look at the fact that he's making noise about the Panama Canal and Greenland, and you could see he's kind of thinking about hemispheric
hegemony,
governance, or hegemony. Yeah, maybe that's a better word way of saying it. I don't know. I'm certainly, Alberta would do better under the. I don't know if you saw Jordan Peterson's video there where he was talking to Canada, saying, hey, what's your value proposition to Alberta compared to the States? And he makes some good points. Like there is no value proposition for us in Canada right now. We'd be better off going our own way, and certainly we'd be better off.
Tim, let me just say, as an Atlantic Canadian, I want to say this about that whole situation, that lives in a province that is, I think last time I checked, that's been years ago, but it was like 46 or 48% of our entire budget comes for you hardworking Albertans. So let me just say, as a father who raised kids not to be a bunch of indie or dependent parasites, and they actually did go out on their own and learn how to be self-sufficient and meaning and have real meaningful lives to themselves, and which is just great. I love watching this play out. But there's a lot of my fellow peeps around here who don't, and I think that's a direct cause. Obviously, is because of this constant. And Quebec is another one, right? Yeah, they want to shut down energy, but yet they consume an awful lot of fucking energy in Quebec. But that's a problem for us in Atlantic Canada. And I'll say to all you Albertans out there, yeah, don't worry. You know, just like with my kids or anyone else's kids, yeah, if you take away the training wheels and all, they'll figure this shit out. They'll have no choice. Matter of fact, it'll make them much more, resolved, give them a little bit more meaning, maybe a little something better to do than sit around and wait for the checks to roll in from Alberta. Right?
Yeah. Well, no, I appreciate that, and it's not like Alberta's free of that kind of thing either, like the Edmonton and and I think this is true across Canada, that the political divide seems to be urban versus rural, really. Right.
And it makes sense.
And so, we're run by the people who are in densely populated areas where, they have a completely different sense of life and the rules one should live by. And we have no time for it. And it certainly, we resent having to support their Laurentian lifestyles while we work our asses off and are, treated as like parasites treat their cows or something,
Yeah. Well, another thing I'll mention about that too, which is another perfect, and it's just so blatant. It's just such a blatant example of the insanity, the hypocrisy. I just got to think that these people, these progressives, and in some way I almost feel bad for them. It's like, you got to be on meds. There's no way a fucking normal human brain could possibly think in this way. So they'll be calling us traitors and basically almost get to the point, just like with the COVID thing. Hey, we should maybe lock these fuckers up for even daring to have some free speech and saying that they might want to join that plantation. But then 2 seconds later, they're all like, the same people are like, and in the media are like, well, maybe we should consider joining the EU. It's like, well, what the fuck? What is it? Are you, it's like, are you against being in a union with another country or not? Because according to what you're saying, but obviously what it is, as me and you probably understand, is those countries are more socialist in nature. They align closer ideologically, right? So it's like, oh, we'll join with them, but America, no. Because Trump,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have mixed feelings about all this. Obviously, like the idea of having fewer countries in the world because Canada and the US become one is not appealing to me. I think there's far too few countries in the world. I'd like to see Canada broken up into at least 5 or more countries. Personally, I think that there are certain geographies and territories that have very different interests than others, right? And that's not to say we can't be good neighbors and have free trade and all that, but we shouldn't be forced to integrate and forced to subsidize each other and all that kind of thing. We should have some freedom to.
It only makes sense even at the individual level. Like you and I, we both have families, but you're not locking your daughters in your basement and making them have to fucking give you a portion of their income. Yeah, it's at some point in time. Yeah, volunteer, especially once we all become adults, everything should be done in a voluntary manner. And I'm with you, Tim. And Gaze, actually, I keep forgetting as the years go by, I get different people watching my content, and of course, it'd be some people that you watch you. So just to emphasize for the people who maybe aren't familiar with both of mine, Tim's stance, and well, I don't have to speak for Tim. But, we basically, to us, the sovereignty should be all the way down to the individual. It's really, to be a free human being, not just states as sovereign. So, yeah, I'm kind of with Tim there. I don't necessarily want to join with any other state, but my realistic, my pragmatic, I just got to deal with the world that I live in self is kind of been taking more of the dominant side of it in the discourse these days. And it's like, well, there's these plantations. I don't want them to exist. I want all 8 billion people to be sovereigns and not to be considered serfs, subjects, or slaves to any ruling class or oligarchy or whatever you want to call it, or democracy or the mob, right? But until that case happens, just like with the people in the Libertarian Party of the US, I'm going to take any opportunity I can that could possibly help, at least, like I say, at least get people in the mindset, or at least, like I say, get people a little bit maybe closer to the people that might be able to help lead them in the direction of liberty, because that to me, at the end of the day, that's what matters. We do live on plantations, more or less,
Yeah.
proverbial plantations, and it's not going
So am
away
I hearing you're
anytime
not going to pick up arms against the U.S. if they ever annex us? Is that
Not
what I'm hearing?
happening.
You're not going to, you're going to answer no to Warren Kinsella's poll. Have you seen his poll on
Yeah.
X
Oh
there?
yeah. Oh
He's
yeah.
going to be, here we have the perfect example, a Laurentian elite who has for years has advocated our oppression, right? Lock them down, tax the shit out of them,
Yeah.
disarm them. And now he wants us to pick up what arms, Kinsella? What arms do you want us to pick up?
Right?
You aren't going to do the fighting. I know you want, boys like me and Bennett here to do the fighting for you, because we actually act in this world. We don't just fucking write shit. We interact in the physical world.
Yeah.
We know you ain't picking up a gun, so why should we pick up a gun for you, Kinsella?
Yeah.
And where are we going to get this gun from?
Well, that's the thing. That's the insane part of all this stuff. And you see some of these people that they're rolling out on the media, and even some of the pundits themselves, and this tough talk is, listen, I mean, I know, Tim, I even seen after you did your hard, was it 70 or whatever you did, and you went down to Cancun. Like, Tim's a fucking built dude. He's a rugged guy. No doubt the guy can handle himself. I can myself. I've been into some bad situations when I was younger growing up in Toronto, but I'm not fucking stupid enough to go out and poke a fucking 800-pound grizzly. Like, hello, there's a thing between, there's a fine line between bravery and fucking stupidity. And you can see the way these idiots are talking today is like, yeah, what? You're basically what are you going to send in, the woke brigade? Right?
Well, you're going to oppress us with the Second Amendment, the First and Second Amendment. Oh God, no, please don't oppress me that way, Daddy.
Yeah. That's it is. It's absolutely insane to see some of the stuff that's taking place. But what was the other thing I wanted to? Oh, here, I won't even bring the articles up. I'll tell you what. I'll just, instead of doing the whole thing, I'll just read it. So listen to this. This is out of British Columbia, but this is in addition, because it's kind of lined up with what we're talking about here. So this was, of course, CBC, folks. I know, like I said, I won't even put it on the screen because I don't want you to have to see. But could Canada put tolls on Alaska truck travel if trade war reignites? BC Premier has floated idea of charging commercial vehicles traveling north if U.S. tariffs impose. So, I mean, to me, first of all, without even me saying words, what are your thoughts on that one?
Well, I think it's a losing battle. I mean, what are you trying to accomplish? It's part of me is sympathetic to it. It's like tit for tat or whatever. But what's really happening here is Trump is punching his own people in the face, and also a few Canadian companies, right? And I just personally, I couldn't do that to my own people, but I guess maybe there's it's not clear to me exactly what this trade war is all about either, to be honest. I don't think it's about fentanyl. I don't really buy that. No. I don't think it's about migrants. I mean, far more fentanyl and migrants come to Canada from the States than go from Canada to the States. So I'm not 100% sure what this is all about. I have a feeling, maybe what Trump is trying to do is create an environment where more production is done in his own country, in the US, make it more difficult for his people to do business with and trade with people outside the US, so that it forces them to stay national. I mean, I don't see how that's a very economically viable thing, but who knows? Here's
my thoughts on. I think, and I could be wrong, but I firmly think that it's not just geopolitics, but like you were saying in that Western, the thing, but even if you think about all the long-term investors, the bondholders, the fact that U.S. is in so much debt. I don't know if you saw that one. Who was it? That lady that came out with a thing, and she even did a breakdown in terms of how much resources, because Canada is the second largest country in terms of land mass on the planet, and we do have a shitload of resources, everything that you need. The rare earth minerals, the oil, the gas, the whole spiel, right? And if you think about it, whether it was the 51st state or if there was some economic union where U.S. basically had guaranteed access to all of our resources, think about like the investor mindset, like I say, the geopolitics of keeping China, because China is now like major dominant player in terms of our resources in this country. I think a lot of that, because if you pay attention to Trump, if you go back decades and the kind of stuff he was talking about, because now it could be just banter, rhetoric, political stuff, right? But actually, Trump's kind of had this kind of thing, and he kind of leads with that kind of talk even back then. And it always seems to come back to the same thing. It's all about securing U.S. and the future of U.S. because they do have a tremendous amount of resources themselves, but with a country of the size they have, you're going to churn through them resources a whole lot quicker than a country of Canada that's big as we are with only like 41 million people. So I think that would assure and alleviate the concerns of a lot of people. Although I see he's even using this stuff though with Ukraine. Did you hear about the fact with Ukraine? He's even saying, so if they're threatened in Canada, they're going to, oh, we're not even going to give them access to our resources, right? That's going to be part of the retaliation. But yet he's basically telling Ukraine, well, you guys already got all of our money. You're looking for more. You're looking for more handouts, bare minimally at the very least. Well, I want access to your resources. So I think he's even creating redundant areas in some way, which would, that alone would send a message to Canada. Oh, you want to play hardball with the resources thing? Well, you're not the only game in town. And that kind of seems to fall in line with the whole art of the deal, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it could be that he hasn't laid his cards on the table yet about exactly what he wants. Right. I mean, I've seen that Pierre Poilievre has bandied the idea of creating an couple of Canadian Arctic military bases, having icebreaker destroyers or something like that, patrolling the northern to push back on the Chinese who have been, snooping around up there trying to exert some Arctic sovereignty. And, that I guess is in the US interest as well. Right. So I could see Donald Trump demanding more, Canada do more to protect its borders and its sovereignty as kind of a negotiated thing with these tariffs too. Who knows?
Yeah. Actually, here's the thing about the tariffs, Tim, that's wild. And I agree with what you're saying in terms of how they're detrimental to each population. But the way it's playing out right now is there is actually no tariffs imposed currently. Now, the ones at the 25% they just announced on steel and aluminum, they're scheduled now for, I think, March 12th. So there's still a figment. So far, there is no harm. But the one thing that is happening, and this is what I find so crazy, and it shows you how these progressives in this country just don't know how to think probably about anything. So even my wife works at the grocery store anyways. And even here, you're getting a lot of these, and of course, a lot of people that would only be watching CBC and CTV, a lot of skews a little bit older, but are just coming in there. It's like, well, you guys should have more labels to let me know which stuff is Canadian and which stuff is American, so I can just buy Canadian. So what it is actually is Canadians are the ones that are proverbially at this point anyways, like the Americans right now are still enjoying access to whatever they had prior. But right now, Canadians in the mindset, because they've been told to think this way by their thought leaders, is I'm going to shoot myself in the foot by paying more, right? And here's the thing, I tell the wife,
you're going to punch yourself in the face. We're going to punch ourselves in the face harder.
Well, that's the thing. And I even said to the wife, like, don't even worry about it, because she feels like sometime when they're asking, she's like, well, it's almost impossible to know what it is, because a lot of these things, they could be made in Canada or produced. You just don't know anyways. But I just say, listen, don't even worry about it, because tell you the truth, if that ends up, because, we all know the old law of supply and demand. So if it ends up being that everyone's overpaying, or the progressives are all wanting to overpay for these so-called, or at least whatever they perceive as these Canadian goods, well, that means all these American goods are going to be sitting on the shelf. And if they sitting on the shelf too long, well, you got to mark them down. And hey, I'll be right there. I'll be right there to save myself a buck or two if I can, right? Yeah. But it just seems foolish to start basically shooting yourself in the foot when the Americans, as of yet, like, can't you hold your powder back just a little bit?
Yeah. Right? Well, and it's interesting too, because like Trump has, like, he just made noises. He's like, there's just going to be a 25% blanket tariff, right? Well, what are your demands? Yeah, well, I don't know, fentanyl and other shit, right? Yeah. And we're left guessing, well, what does he want? And so what did you see in Canada? Everyone, all the premiers, the federal government scrambling to implement something. What do you think is going to please Trump? This, doing all these things. Yeah. And then Trump's like, oh, okay. Yeah, we'll put it on pause for another month. Right. So even without making any clear demands, he got a bunch of shit, and probably a bunch of shit he wasn't even expecting delivered to him, right? And I think that's kind of what is happening here with all the stuff he's doing, right? It's just like he's making all these threats. People are reacting and losing their mind and going to their doctor for anxiety and making the country react. And he's getting getting some sweet deals. I mean, we're now basically guarding the U.S. border for them, right? We're like spending billions on protecting the U.S. border. I mean, isn't that what your border patrol's for?
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, we're I guess now we're doing it. So yeah, he's getting us to pay for his fucking border control.
Well, in addition to that, though, Tim, here's the other thing too: is they're talking about the travel. So now they're trying to. The big story now, or one of the stories, is Canadians are refusing to travel down the U.S. because that's typically that's usually their destination, especially for the winter, right? So where are they choosing instead? Oh, they're going to Europe. It's like, wait a minute, wouldn't a lot of these people be the environmentalists that want to reduce the carbon footprint? It's like, so rather than travel a few hundred miles or maybe 1,000 miles, in your car or your EV that you're driving or whatever, now you're going to just jump on and travel the destination over in Europe and spend your time going all over there and wasting your resources over in there. To me, it just seems, and that's actually that was probably not the greatest example, but it does seem that now, especially even the way the liberals, because I like to think of, if I was one of the supporters of the progressives listening to the liberals and the way they're talking now is like, they don't seem to. Everybody, Christian Freeland, everyone's supposed to like, yeah, man, the carbon tax bad now. It's like, well, what the? If you're one of these liberal supporters, you're like, wait a minute. The whole reason why I supported you people because you cared about the environment. Now you're just thrown to the wind because Orange Man. Right?
Well, yeah, and look what's happening now. The liberals are surging in the polls, right? I mean, they're trending like they may just beat the CPC.
Wouldn't that be wild?
And that just goes to show you how I guess left-wing Canadians are. I mean, look, here's my take on that. Canadians hate Justin or hate Pierre Poilievre, like the average Canadian hates PP, but they really hate Trudeau, right? And so Poilievre was polling well while Trudeau was the man, but now he's not the man anymore. So now they're looking at people like Carney and going, oh, this guy sounds all sorts of rational and reasonable. He's the adult in the room. He knows lots about the economy. I don't like the economy. That's this man, and Poilievre just comes off as kind of a smug, schmarmy dude, right? He's got a lot of quips and jabs, but he just seems like a sarcastic Poindexter, I think, to most Canadians. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the Liberals surge here and actually win the next election.
Well, here, and it's funny you mention that because this is actually, and I've put this out in a couple spots on X there in terms of reply and even just on my own post. But I basically put, at this point, I and many other Canadians don't care which establishment party wins the next election because they all represent the continuation of the status quo. Poilievre and the cons are all talk and do nothing more than tinker around the edges once in power because they're beholden to the same large cohort of Canadian collectivists who are the largest voting bloc in the country. Maybe another term of the Libercrats further destroying this country at an alarming pace is what is needed for Canadians to finally start rejecting big government collectivism. Because that to me is, I agree. I of course I think like most of the people like that would be, especially my conservative minded peeps, or even some of my minarchist libertarian peeps. Of course, Poilievre it'd be a nice reprieve from the Trudeau. You could say, oh, look, we got rid of the libs, right? We own the libs, man, right? You could do your little parade in your lap for a day or two, but we all know what the hell we're going to end up with. I mean, Poilievre is everything about what poll's good, right? So it's like, well, why let us slowly bleed out? Yeah, I mean, if the Liberals and the Democrats win again and they continue on that, and we know how fast the pace, the destruction they've been on. So it's like, if you want to keep voting for the Liberals? Well, maybe that's what you need. Maybe that's that cold, hard lesson, that tough pill that you got to swallow. I don't know. It would be rough. I get it. But, maybe that's what it takes, right?
Yeah. And look, I don't know. I mean, I often say that the COVID pandemic did more to advance the cause of liberty than all libertarians combined, having in their podcasts. But at the same time, I don't know what it is, right? Like Poilievre, I think he has a relatively good grasp on economics. He's relatively libertarian, at least on economics, the way he talks, right? But I just don't think, at the end of the day, I don't see the action from the conservatives. And I'll give you an example. My job on the union exec is I'm a vice president of external relations, which means that my job is to talk to MLAs and elected officials and try to lobby for our stuff. And right now it's great because I get to lobby for smaller government. That's actually going to benefit our fire department. Is to get the province out of our way and, let us control things locally. But, I talked to MLAs, and this one MLA, her chief of staff was a huge fanboy of me. Like, he said, I voted for you in 2015. He's like, you're the first guy I voted for. And like, I can't believe you're here. And, I'm like getting fanboyed here. And he tells us to the MLA, he's like, do you know who this is? And she's like, oh, I'm a libertarian too. Right. And then she turns around and asks us to support an initiative she has to get EpiPens on all fire trucks in the province. Right. So she's asking us to lobby for the government to spend money on something, right? I'm like, how does this equate? I believe you that you're a libertarian, but I just see how the reality of how politics works in these circles. And even the Minister of Jobs and Economy, we're trying to get some movement on WCB. We don't think WCB serves our members that well. If we, for example, as a libertarian, if we had private employment insurance, we would certainly have probably fairly expensive employment insurance because firefighters tend to get a lot of cancers, and it's hard to prove that the cancer was caused by, right? And so now we're left with, okay, I've got a member who's got lung cancer. He smoked maybe half a dozen cigarettes in his life. He's been on all these massively toxic fires when safety standards were low, inhaled all the smoke, and he's got lung cancer. He's essentially like a veteran that you sent off to war, and he's now debilitated because of it, and now you're leaving him alone, right? So I'm left in the unenviable position of being like, well, look, WCB, come on, can you please get my boy here coverage for his cancer? Clearly, like he doesn't qualify for there was a recent class action lawsuit against Big Tobacco on behalf of Canadians, and they won and got a multi-billion-dollar settlement. And so every smoker in Canada who has got lung cancer is entitled to $60,000. Well, this guy doesn't qualify for the $60,000 because they say, well, smoking didn't cause your lung cancer. He doesn't qualify for WCB because they're saying your job didn't cause the lung cancer. And, but what I'm left to do here, operating in real politics, operating in the real world, as we say, Bennett, and outside my libertarian purism thing is, I got a member who's suffering from lung cancer. He's going to die. He's got 300 tumors and the system is failing him. And now I'm having to advocate for what? A little bit more government to help my buddy out, right? I want you to increase government spending to help my member out. And that sucks as a libertarian to ask that. I mean, I'd much prefer to see WCB broken up and have a private insurance on this that we could buy that would cover our members. But that's not the world I live in. So now I'm in the real politic world of having to ask for more government. And I think what happens with people like Pierre Poilievre and all these conservatives who have some libertarian leanings is they find themselves in the same position. We're in this unenviable position of having to operate in the real world and having to fix problems that the government created by adding a little bit more government, not a lot more government like the liberals will do, but just a tiny bit more to try to fix this problem caused by, and it just keeps compounding on itself. And so, I don't know what to say, but again,
the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Well, it is. And so part of my foray into this world of real politics and influences, well, maybe I need to go back to my purist roots and fight from that side of things, because at the end of the day, the only answer is to get rid of all this stuff and to start afresh or something, or to build parallel structures and make the state irrelevant, whatever. But it certainly doesn't seem like we're going to get a smaller government from, libertarians operating within the machine to,
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Tim, because actually that was something Keith Tay, shout out to Keith Tays and the rest of the fine folks who did start up the Libertarian Party in New Brunswick. Some great peeps, and they put in some great efforts for sure. And it was started within a couple months. And there was a lot of people, a lot of grassroots support, genuine grassroots support to get it off the ground, do some stuff. And of course, they asked me if I would like to be a candidate for my riding, of course. And boy, I it didn't take me long because I'm like you. It's like I know once I get in that position and I am into the politics of things, that side of me that I can do right now. And I feel actually I can do quite a bit outside, not, like I say, not tinkering inside of the system, but I think I can at least be a voice of reason. How much that helps, I don't know, but I do lead in my own community. Like I don't just speak, like I lead by example. But it was one of those things. It was tough for me. But I mentioned them just like I did with the PBC when they were forming theirs. Listen, I'll be here to help you out and support your stuff. I'll promote your stuff. I work actually a lot of times, especially for PBC at the time, I wouldn't even be able to guess how many hours and hours and hours, or like way in excess of hours of how much time I put in an effort to interviewing candidates and supporters and members and promoting the party nonstop, day to night on the internet and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, I'm just not happy. Actually, I'm going to ask you this because that just reminded me something. Someone has actually asked me about this, and I think I know the answer, but I'd rather you give it on this because they're probably going to end up watching this live stream. Actually, is they were asking you because I've come to learn, I think you have too, that Maxime Bernier, I mean, he talked the talk in terms of being a libertarian. Anyways, his main guy, I don't know if you remember his name, Daniel Tyree. Now, apparently he's not with the party in right now. So I won't say that, and I don't know the actual reasoning behind it, but I had a little back and forth with him on X, and he was Maxime's one of his main guys at the time. And to me, it was the vibe I got from the supporters, the members and stuff. Once you finally all come to fruition, I had those hours to talk with them. It seemed to me it was just nationalism and race. That seemed to be the dominant thing. And I'm not saying Maxime all by himself, that's the only thing he concerned or cared about. But whatever was happening with the party, the message that I got was it was a whistle call seemingly for people to care about what color your skin is and some form of ultra nationalism. And as you know, that's not my game. Didn't want nothing to do with that. And actually this guy, I even shared or copied the screen captured his tweet. He's not even, one thing I'll say, at least he's honest about it, is he's an ultra nationalist is what he is. Right. But anyway, so knowing this now, but someone was asking me, well, why did Tim offer Maxime to take over the Libertarian Party? But of course, at that time, I'll allow you to answer, but I didn't know anything at the time because this was all happening fluid. But as far as I was concerned, you were offering just because you figured there was some kind of groundswell of movement, and if we could help you out in terms of, anyways, never mind me answer. You go ahead and answer for yourself there, Tim. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, why did I offer? I had poor judgment, I think. I didn't want to see the sign. I mean, we talked about this earlier, right? About confirmation bias and about wanting to believe something and ignoring evidence to the contrary to that and putting blinders on. Yeah. And this was another learning lesson for your boy. Well, listen, Maxime Bernier was making all sorts of noises that he was a libertarian, right? Yeah. That's how he positioned himself in the leadership race in the Conservative Party when he was up against, you remember Kelly Leach? She was the populist. She was the ultra nationalist. She was and he criticized her for having Trump style policies, right? And he was his messaging was all libertarian, right? And then he lost that race, and I immediately got on YouTube, put out a video offering Max my leadership spot. I said, look, I'll step aside as leader, let you lead this party, let you continue on with the momentum. You are obviously a libertarian, and you should lead this party. If you're a libertarian, have the courage of your convictions, call yourself that, and lead, right? And if you don't, we'll just adopt your policy, which is libertarian enough, I guess. And it wasn't as ideal as I would have liked it, but I'm like, we'll use your policy and we'll take your supporters and we'll try to mount opposition with your own platform. Be better if you were leading right. And so that was kind of a political stunt, and it got Max's attention. And over the next year, we talked about it. And he kept saying, well, I'm hoping I can do some change from within. I'm hoping they'll, and then at the end, he went off and formed his own party, which I thought was weird, right? He formed the PPC, but I think what he did was he made a political calculation, which was, and you could see that, right? The tweets that he sent out signaling his break from the Conservative Party and
Yeah.
forcing them to take action on him to oust him from the party so that
Yeah.
he could go away with his hand held up and say, well, fuck the Conservatives. They don't stand for principle.
Yeah.
He could have come out with tweets that said, hey, taxation is obviously theft, supply management, blah, blah, blah. He could have, come out with an anti-state message. He could have talked about regulation. He could have talked about the drug war. He could have talked about all these things, all these libertarian messages that would have got him the same result and sent him over to the Libertarian Party. But instead, what he did was he, as an astute political operative, noticed that there's a groundswell of populism, right? Of this alt-right populism, ultranationalism, a pushback against multiculturalism and all this. So he's like, I'm going to glom onto that. That's going to be the next phase of my political career. And so all his tweets that separated him from the Conservative Party were like anti-multiculturalism, stronger borders, all this stuff. It was very little liberty stuff in there. And so he's pragmatic, right? He wants a following. And so he's going to go to the crowd. This is what politicians do. They figure out what the crowd wants and then they become that. So I should have saw that at the time but I let, part of it was, look, I'm kind of done being leader of the party. Like I blew my pension on this and I've, financially destituted myself and my family fighting for this cause. And I would love to hand the baton on to someone like a charismatic leader who's already got a following who can take this to the next level. And that's what I really strongly hoped that Bernier would be. And that's why I entertained the idea of a party merge when a mutual friend suggested to it and reached out to Bernier. And, again, I should have saw another red flag when the first thing Bernier asked me on our phone call when we were talking about a merge is, how is your party incorporated? Where are the articles of incorporation? What, is it a nonprofit? Is it a this? Is it a that? I thought we'd be talking about principles and like platforms and like how we're going to, no, he wanted to know how it was incorporated. I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know if it is incorporated. It turns out it's not incorporated. I don't even know if I should be saying that because all political parties, most other political parties have a corporation that is registered to them that runs the financial arm of it. And there's a board of directors or there's owners of that corporation. And those are the people that essentially own the political party. And maybe it's a weakness of the Libertarian Party that we don't have that, because now anyone can start a Libertarian Party corporation and basically co-opt the party. I might be giving away a playbook here. So I thought about doing that myself just to protect it. But the point is, now if you look at the articles of incorporation on the PPC, there was at the time, I think 3 names on it: Bernier and his Mass, and I think someone else, another lawyer. So those guys own the PPC. So if the PPC ever folds up, they own all the assets. Right. There's no due process. There's nothing. So why would Maxime be so curious about that? I should have been, those are the questions I should have been asked, but I consciously ignored those questions to try to get a merge happen and take Liberty to the next level. Well,
well, you know what that told me though, Tim, about you in particular, and the reason why to this day, and hopefully for as long as we're alive, that we will remain friends, is it showed me that you had the humility. Because like you say, you put yourself out there, you put yourself not just out there as a libertarian in a country like Canada, which is already, but like you say, you took your pension, you spent all this money, you had high ideals for the party. And of course I was so glad to see, and you were a great representative, great voice as far as I'm concerned. But you showed the humility that you were willing to, obviously to me, it was like, this guy's not in nothing for power. You're willing to literally hand over, like, here, go ahead, man, take over my position. That's someone, like, that is actually the kind of person that I actually admire, someone, because if you're not looking for power, then the other thing is you must have obviously some other goal in mind. And Maxime definitely seemed to be like, if there's power to be had, like he was chomping at the bit. And the only reason why he didn't jump at that opportunity, because he didn't think he was going to gain enough power, as far as I'm concerned, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's got a good thing going there, right? I mean, he's the leader for life. It's his party. He owns it. He's making his 6-figure pension plus a six-figure salary from his party.
Mhm.
He's living in Florida. I mean,
I know, right? Living in
like, I don't know. Part of me thinks maybe I did this all wrong. Christ almighty. I got nothing but sacrifice and pain from this. But no, you know, to me, it was, maybe it's a result of my kind of evangelical roots. You know, I always, and my mom put in my head, God put you on this planet for a purpose. And so I've always been looking for, what is that purpose? Right. And when I lost my religion, I still had that, that drive of, I need to serve something higher than myself. I need like a holy cause of some type. And to me, liberty is that holy cause of that. This is important. It's like, I have kids, you know, God willing, I'll have grandkids in the not too distant future, and they have to live, you know, in this matrix of ideas, and the ideas suck right now. And we need to change that. And what can we do to change that? What can we do to save this country, save the, you know, this community, save this province? And that's how I always looked at it. Right. And I just don't think that, you know, I've been around enough politicians, and Bernier is no exception. I mean, they just don't view the world that way. Right. You know, they're just, they're self-interested, and I don't blame them for that. I mean, and they have some good intentions as well. Right. But they'll never let their good intentions ruin their self-interest or cause them calamity. Whereas your boy here, that wasn't.
That's the thing that we libertarians, most of us anyways, seem to have in spades, is the knowledge of same with Austrian economics and the way it deals is we just accept the world for what it is, instead of, like, you know, Keynesians or idealists like collectivists, is you just deal with the world as it is and try to function as best within it. But that's the thing with when you get some of those high ideals like some of these other type folks do, it ends up being detrimental to all of us. But one thing I will say about this in terms of people like you and people like myself and so many other, I mean, you know, Tim, yourself, when we first started even talking, which has been many years ago, I mean, we probably could have counted on, well, especially on the East Coast, maybe more so in Alberta. But you know, we were, I mean, in terms of anyone that you would see, you know, there was maybe a handful of us that would call ourselves libertarians in this country, right? Well, I mean, not much, right? I maybe more than that, but it was a pretty small number. And the ideas did seem to be, you know, want to be accepted by very many people. And even in the US, I watched, you know, we watched the Ron Paul, we watched the Ron Paul thing. But I mean, holy shit, look at this from 2008. So it's gone by a little ways, 17 years, I guess, or so. But wow, to now. And to me, it just blows my mind to see Ron Paul and Elon Musk. Like, so Trump appoints Elon Musk, which is a Silicon Valley libertarian. Most of these guys, most of the original Silicon Valley guys were and are libertarians, right? And we know this. And to see him quoting Milton Friedman, sharing Ron Paul, and even saying that, you know, actually back and forth that Ron Paul, they want, like that's a dream.
They're bringing him in to help off the Fed.
Right? Like, I mean, come on, that's
I agree with
that's Ron Paul's wet dream. Right?
Yeah, one of your commenters said the only thing, the only high value thing Trump had done is Doge, which is an absolute necessity. And I couldn't agree more. Seneca or Senico, I'm not sorry if I'm butchering your name.
Senico, I think.
Yeah. You know, that is awesome. And to see the wailing and gnashing of teeth happening over obvious corrupt money. Right. And of course, they're dealing with small potatoes right now in USAID, but they're going to move on, I think, next to the Pentagon and the Fed. And now, like Ron Paul, I think I saw a quote from Ron Paul saying that, you know, obviously these recent things are like blowing the minds of Democrats. But when we're blowing the minds of both Democrats and Republicans, when they're both angry at us, then we're making some headway. And I think that this next thing is going to be very interesting to see how Trump deals with a Republican base that is is going to have their heads explode over military cuts that are likely to come if you know, Elon Musk gets his way.
Yeah, well, I'll agree with Senico, and the Doge is definitely the big thing. And this is the thing. Well, not just Doge, but let's keep this in mind too, folks. There's a couple other little things. So I'm sure you are familiar too, so Ross Ulbricht, right? He basically created a website.
Oh, yeah, that was huge. Yeah.
Yeah, like he created a website. But the thing is, when I'm forgetting her name right now, anyways, when the director there at down the Libertarian Party in the U.S.,
Angela McArdle.
Angela McArdle. Yeah, they got all the caucus, the Mises caucus, the classical liberal caucus. They got everybody together and they basically tried to hammer out. And there was a lot of disagreements, but they hammered out, if we can ask Trump for one thing, because she got him to agree to come to the Libertarian Party convention, which was awesome all on its own. But she basically said, if we could just ask him for one thing, what could we do? And the largest percentage of them, the members said, yeah, let's try to get Ross free, because this is bullshit. This man, he's a young man. He's been put in prison for the rest of his life. He's got a loving mother, a loving lady there. I don't know if it's his wife or girlfriend or whatever, but he's got family that cared, and they put in years and years and years of effort. I mean, you could just imagine the mental anguish and torture it must have been for him to know that he's going to be locked for the rest of his life for basically a victimless crime, for basically giving people the ability to do things outside of the purview of government. But to me, I mean, not even if you're Ross Ulbricht, but anyone in his family, his community, and so many other people who might have benefited from the things he did to help others. To me, that was a big old win as far as I'm concerned, because you helped the man, a real person. This wasn't hypothetical. This was a real person that, got released from prison. And I mean, good for him. I think that was just another great thing that happened. And how it happened was people like Dave Smith and the Mises Caucus people, who themselves would be just like me and Tim. We're full on libertarians here, folks, anarchists, if you want to call it, but being pragmatic and realistic. And to me, this is what I see today with especially the big money movers and shakers in the liberty movement, is the purism. You still want to keep that close to your heart. And that's really important, to keep your principles and your ethics, very close to your heart, but never forego an opportunity to actually bring real liberty into the world. Because if you can't, I mean, what everyone sits back and Ross rots away, Doge doesn't exist, right? I think that's detrimental. And those people who typically I find align with the classical liberal ones, which I think a lot of these folks are just collectivists. They're pretending to be libertarians, a lot of them, right? But to me, those two things alone, and to see what's happening, I mean, let me just say one thing, then you can bounce off that. But in terms of, for me personally, this USAID thing and knowing, and of course now with the Canadian contingent coming out with the same release in terms of what Canada does in terms of our foreign aid, and the fact that now we already knew that our media is basically bought and paid for now with not just the CBC, but the $595 billion that the Trudeau Liberals gave them. But it was hard on my psychology and a little bit on my mental health to know, because I used to think, is there really this many people that just so hates liberty and is so against libertarians so much? But no, I actually am in a much better state of mind and mental health these days, knowing that no, this was actual a conspiracy. This was actual people, and the numbers are there.
Yeah.
What was it? 6,000, over 6,000. I think it was 6,000 or 7,000 media personalities, and 600 or 700 organization. So basically, people have been paid. All those people that you're seeing online that are probably arguing with you, right, and telling you how terrible you are for wanting to be a free human being. Yeah, they're probably being paid for that. They're not just people that are sitting there that think it's terrible. No, it's a coordinated and concerted effort. And like I say, to know that alone has been great for me, and has revealed it. And I mean, Elon buying X, spending tens of billions of dollars to reveal the Twitter file. To me, all of these things have been great positive signs, and I think it's actually given us some energy going forward. What are your thoughts anyway, Tim?
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I don't know. I think the danger here is in what you might call waypoint libertarianism, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Give me a sober second thought for sure. No, I like that.
Right. Well, no, it's, I mean, I waffle between, like, when I see the people that just fought valiantly against lockdowns and against government overreach, cheering on, I don't know, cheering on tariffs or all these other like kind of statist authoritarian things. Right. It does give me a sober second thought about. Well,
can I just say one thing about the tariffs though, real quick?
Sure.
So I agree with you on that. I agree. We are definitely free market proponents. But here, if this is true, so from what I'm hearing, and tell me anyone want to correct me if I'm wrong here. What I'm hearing though is the tariffs that Trump is looking to impose is, and this might align with a libertarian more easily, more readily, is in retaliation. So if right now,
Sure.
if the
No,
Trump, if the
understand
U.S.
it.
doesn't, if the U.S. doesn't impose tariffs on us now, but we are on them, I'm not. I agree. Like I don't believe in tariffs.
Right,
But
right.
if someone's trying to shank you, it's probably a good
Yeah.
idea for you to.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
also like I tend to I'm kind of neutral on tariffs. In the past, I would have been dead set against them, but right now I'm like, oh, is this could be a response to Canadian aggression on
Mhm.
U.S. citizens, right? There
Right.
might be some way, and I'm not aware of that. That's a reason to support Trump's tariffs. But the reason I see most people supporting Trump's tariffs is fentanyl. We're
Yeah.
sending tens of millions of lethal doses, and this has to stop. Fentanyl has to be prohibited, right? Which, disheartens me a little bit. It's like, okay, aren't you a liberal? Like, the U.S. sends billions of lethal doses to Canada, and yet I'm still alive. How is it that I'm still alive, Bennett, when they're sending billions of these lethal doses up here?
Yeah, right.
How is it? Could it be because I don't inject fentanyl in my veins? Like, and by the way, people that do inject fentanyl in their veins, there's obviously a demand for billions of these lethal doses, and yet there's not billions of deaths from addicts. I mean, the majority of fentanyl use people are alive. Now, you can point to the things that I see on my job, which are terrible, which are open drug use in public areas and just urban decay and deplorable conditions and all that, and fentanyl is the drug of choice and is a fuel to that for sure, but it's not causing that. And so, I just like that disheartens me a little bit. It's like when people are like become giant drug warriors, and it's gun owners, people who own guns are, who like, they use the same arguments that gun grabbers use on them. They're like, well, these are lethal doses. I could say, well, the 30,000 guns that come to Canada every year, how many lethal doses of bullets are those, right? Well, there's thousands or millions of lethal doses of bullets, except it's not, because most people most gun owners understand that guns are a tool. They don't understand that fentanyl is a tool, partly because they don't use, I mean, I use it as a tool on my job all the time, every day. It's a great tool. I use fentanyl. So I see it as a tool to be used or abused, right? Like a gun. And so, and I see fentanyl as the reason fentanyl is a drug of choice for addicts is a byproduct of statism. It's a byproduct of the fact that government clamped down on doctors prescribing opiates. You can't have a pill mill anymore at a doctor's office. At the same time, they demanded pharmaceuticals stop making crushable opiates. So now you can't go to the doctor, say you have back pain, get a Percocet and crush it and snort it for a safe high. Now you got to go to the black market. So all these things have conspired, government, and that's not to mention, why are people addicts in the first place? It's because they're living lives of lonely desperation, caused by family breakup, incentivized by the welfare state, family law courts, all the things that the government control, the removal of social cohesion and by a large government. I mean, I see it all the time on the job. I joke all the time now on the job that someone's got a stuck fart and they called the government, and we're the government. We're here to help you with your stuck fart. No, but people are, like, I'll give you an example, perfect example. I responded the other day to a 9 echo. A 9 echo is a cardiac arrest. Okay. Someone is in cardiac arrest. We got to get there quick. On the way there, through two different, it's icy, and people aren't seeing me till the last second, and they're slamming on the brakes. And I saw at least 2 fender benders in the wake of me responding to this cardiac arrest of people just not paying attention. Before we even got to the cardiac arrest, we got canceled because it just turns out it was someone sleeping. So in other words, no one bothered to check that person was actually in cardiac arrest. They just saw someone on the side of the street and they called the government, and they're like, can you go check this out? I'm worried about this. Right. The absolute lack of personal accountability and responsibility that led to misuse of resources, at least 2 fender benders, all this, like the ripple effect of this cannot be understated or overstated. Right. It's just amazing. Anyways,
No, you make the most perfect point ever there, Tim, because that really is what it is at the end of the day. I'm not worried about my sons or anyone that in my immediate family or vicinity going to get hooked on fentanyl. Why? Because you make sure that when you raise them or you're around them, that they become whole individual human beings and actually have real meaning and purpose in their life. But like you say, as the family's breaking down, as you know, and it is a lot of government intervention that does that. But I will even say, even if you don't care about all of these things, which everything you said makes complete sense, what we understand as human beings, or at least we should, most of us, is no matter what you do anyways, even if you try to ban anything. I mean, I remember growing up, what was it? People that was huffing paint, gas, right? Glue, liquid paper.
Oh yeah.
If people want to put themselves in a really fucked up altered state of mind, and then obviously if a person's putting themselves in an altered state of mind, yeah, they've got issues. So what are you doing by just thinking that you're going to just find a way, like you get rid of fentanyl? They're just going to find something else.
Something's going to replace it, and it's going to be a much more potent opiate
Mhm.
that is easier to smuggle and therefore much more potent at higher doses, at lower doses, right?
Yeah.
And so you're going to keep compounding.
Well, isn't there always something like that called carfentanil or something like that? And
there's carfentanil. Yeah.
I think that's even worse, right? Isn't it? Or
Yeah. There's that, and there's other analogs. I mean, they'll come up with something else, right? It's just
So
sorry,
go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say I can't remember what the rule, what it's called. It's a rule of the drug lore. The more you ban hard drugs, the harder the drugs become, the more dangerous they become. And I mean, to use an analogy, I was thinking about this. I was trying to make this an analogy so gunnies could understand it.
Yeah.
Imagine, well, I mean, it's not hard to imagine. This is kind of happening in Canada right now, but imagine you banned all the guns. The only people that are allowed to have guns are cops, right?
Yeah.
But there's a technology out there that allows you to own, let's say 3D printed machine guns, ghost guns, right? That for whatever reason, the only kind of guns that you can get are these machine guns that spray like 1,000 rounds a minute. And I mean, not a very practical gun for personal defense, right? Good for assaulting a position or, overthrowing the government or something, but not great for personal use. You can't really hunt with it. You can't defend your home with it very safely, but that's the only option you have. That's what you have with fentanyl is that happening because everything else has been banned. You now are left with the most lethal, impractical. It's not even a practical drug for addicts to get high on. It's got such a short half-life. I mean, that's why I use it, is because I take away their consciousness. I do what I need to do, reset the bone or get the airway, or pick them up off the ground if they're multi-trauma, without them screaming their head off. And then a few minutes later, they're back with it again, and the drug is starting to decline. Well, that's not very good. If you're a recreational user or an addict, you want that high to last longer, right? So this isn't even the drug that most addicts would choose if they could.
Right. Well, to me, and you kind of alluded to it anyways. And the most important thing when you're talking about this heavy drug use or even, really bad alcoholism or whatever the crutch or vice that people have is, how about deal with the situation where it's at? I always used to say that even when I was younger, is like for homeless people, I mean, whether you're talking about these people that are homeless or the drug addicts that are living on the streets, is wow, it means you had to have got to the point in your life, and obviously you'd have to be some personal responsibility involved in that, but it also means that there's literally not one person in your life that seems to have or even wants to at this point in time try to do anything to try to help you, because you've either pushed everyone away. But those are the situations where when you get to the point where you're at that edge, I mean, it's kind of,
but you don't even want help at that point because it's enabled. It's paid for by the government. Right. You have everything paid for. And again, if this were private charity or individuals, there would be strings attached to that charity. You would, it's a difficult thing, but there'd be a lot more tough love in the real world if it were libertarian. And, and at the same time, it's like, look, you've got there again, you ban fentanyl, and you're still left with this huge mental health crisis, right? Like how many women, I think it's over 50% of women in the US are on some antidepressant. Why is that? you could blame big pharma, but you could also say, well, what is it that's so miserable and miserating in everyone's lives that they're turning to pharmaceuticals,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that is the question that I think needs to be answered more than why is big pharma profiting and making it, like big pharma didn't really create the state but they are certainly reaping the benefits off big government and promoting it now.
Yeah. Yeah, big time. No, I agree. I was just looking at some of the comments there because I mentioned that earlier that I was going to try to get into some of the comments, but I just wanted to see Dave Hemden because you're talking about the Sam Cooper. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Sam Cooper. Allude to the money laundering. What was a log? If the problem too. Anyway, so my understanding of the Sam Cooper guy is he's a media guy that's not like most of the other establishment, but he's been paying attention, not just election interference, but a lot of money laundered. But I'm not sure if you heard about this or not. It was actually a 5-minute segment. I was trying to find it. I was actually impressed. Actually, if I can, Tim, I'm going to try to find this. Sure. It was this guy that was being interviewed on CBC, and Canadians, I mean, at least some of them are going to get this information now, but in terms of just how deep the corruption and how crazy even our system.
And so he's uncovered money laundering, Bennett, or what?
Yeah, well, not just that, but if I can find this thing, I wonder if it would be easier if I went to my Facebook page and found it. But in addition to that, oh yeah, that's right. I'm on the wrong one here. That's why. Is TD, I don't know if you heard, but got the largest fine in the history of fines in terms of money laundering. And they are part and parcel of this whole, the drug trade and all this money laundering stuff too. But the stuff that's taken place in this country, like I say, let me just try to find this, is just, it's unbelievable. And people don't realize that actually, let me do this while I'm trying to find it here. Actually, let me bring this up here real quick here, Tim. I'm kind of getting off track here because I was trying to find that, but I want to bring this up. I even replied that I have nothing against, and since you actually, I should have brought this up since you were talking about unions there earlier, but even when I was younger, I was never a big fan of unions. But I don't know if you heard about this that got that Canada Proud is showing here today. It was a report from the Canadian Union of Public Employees calls on the federal government to seize the property and nationalize of any business which threatens to move nationally important operations to the U.S. So, I mean, that kind of sounds, doesn't that sound a little bit like communism?
Yeah.
But that's,
the QP. I will say this, I've never been a big fan of unions either. In Alberta, there's one union that's at the table with the provincial government who's talking about restructuring and decentralizing healthcare. That's our union. Every other union is wailing and gnashing their teeth.
The president is the amount of fentanyl.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Tim. I was just getting it ready.
No, I totally see that with unions, right? I mean, they are created by socialists. Unions wouldn't be an issue. There are actually some benefits to unions.
Oh, for sure.
For the employer and everyone. But the problem is, like everything, is that there's a monopoly, right? Once you have that bargaining certificate from the government, you have a monopoly on bargaining. You can't secede from it. You can't have start a competing union, and all that kind of stuff. So there are some real problems with it.
Well, we'll just move on past that because I don't want to get in trouble with your fine folks over there because I know you're in the means of trying to do some good anyways. But anyways,
I've seen some real good coming from our union. For example, there's a lot of woke DEI, corporate HR overreach, and it provides a means to protect our members against that stuff. Right on. But again, that's adding government to the problem of government. So
So I don't know if you've seen this, and I was actually pretty surprised considering, and I think this was, if I check it, it might have been, it probably is that CBC Watcher. So I shared it from them. Like I say, shout out to CBC Watcher for all the content that you put out there on X. Save a lot of Canadians from having to go to watch CBC. But anyways, this was about a 5-minute segment. I'll try to play as much as I can here, Tim, because the revelations in this was just quite striking. It actually might help expand on some things for people. And I'm kind of a little bit kudos, I guess, to Rosie there for at least having this guy on. I don't know what the reason behind is it, but anyways, let's just listen to see what this gentleman here has got to say in this interview.
One of the things that we have pointed to a lot over the past couple of weeks when responding to the president is the amount of fentanyl that crosses from Small. It was 43 pounds was seized at that border. But I understand you think that is not sort of something that we should be focusing on, the fact that it's a small amount, particularly compared to Mexico. Give me your thoughts.
Well, several months ago, you had the biggest lab in the history of the world.
Yeah.
Taken over by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Vancouver. I mean, we'd never even seen anything like this. It made Breaking Bad look like, minor league. Okay, so and definitely where there was Chinese organized crime, possibly Iran as well. The facts have not been released by your government. It's so sort of astonishing that they haven't provided more information publicly. But
you want to say something there, Tim?
Yeah, no, I was just quipping. I'm like, it was the largest lab in the world that made Breaking Bad look. I'm like, well, how did it make Pfizer look? I mean,
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
How do their labs compare to big pharma labs?
That's a good point, Tim. Good point.
I think they know they're sitting on a big scandal here. The fact that this thing emerged and it's tied into these biker gangs who've been hired to go down to the United States in some cases and assassinate people like, my former boss, Secretary Mike Pompeo, President Trump, and others. This is another whole level of scandal involving it. But the key thing to focus on is that someone was making over 100 million doses of deadly fentanyl in a lab that you didn't know about right under your nose. Now, how many other labs do you think you have going? And, let me folks, one last thing. There's very little border enforcement. So 42 kilograms, it's a nonsensical number. We don't have, most of the drugs are going from Mexico to Canada and then being brought south into the Northwest United States on ships. You have almost no port enforcement with police. So we don't have no idea, except from our sources, what's going on. And we hear some bad things.
I will say, I mean, they did find the super lab. I mean, I take your point. It was under their nose, but there was police work done in order to find it, uncover it, and charge the people responsible. So that is a positive piece. I take your point, though, that there could be more. And so tell me what more you think needs to be done to deal with some of the things you're talking about, as well as the czar. They've increased surveillance at the border. They are going to crack down on Mexican cartels. I talked to the RCMP commissioner about that, and there is more shared intelligence that's going to happen between Canada and the U.S. What else would be helpful in this instance then?
Let me first stress the RCMP is an excellent organization. Okay, you've got very good police in your country. Yeah. Okay, you got great CSIS, your intelligence organization is first rate as well. Your problem is your laws. It's the Stinchcomb law, which I'm not, like the world's expert on, but basically every time we try to go up on a phone number in Canada, almost all the money laundering networks tied to China, which is about 90% of all money laundering in the United States, is tied to Canada. Okay, so when we try to go up on those numbers with your police, they have to inform the person that we're targeting their number. That's crazy. How can we run an undercover?
So before we continue on there, Tim, so that part there kind of stuck out to me. Whether you're pro or against, the pretense of whether there should be a drug trade at all or not, right? Whether you got libertarian creds or you're conservative or liberal, but the people in this country, at least they should have bare minimally realized that they act like they're against lawlessness, right? But in reality, like, the things are set up so that lawlessness actually flourishes for certain people, because it would have been a pretty simple thing. Yeah, if they're going to investigate these crimes, probably the last thing you want to do is have it set up so you tell the person that, hey, we're looking into your what you're doing. Right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know what to think about. I don't know anything about that law, but okay, if you tell me it exists, fine. The thing that stuck out for me was just the way they frame it, right? Like 10 million or 100 million lethal doses. I mean, that's like saying that my local water treatment plant produces, a million lethal doses of water. It's like, because you can drown in water, right? I mean, how many people could drown? Like, that's so much water.
Yeah.
So many people could drown in all that
Yeah.
water they're piping around the city, right? I mean, it's just the way it's framed is it's kind of ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, and I mean the hypocrisy of shutting down these labs while letting big pharma run around unchecked. It's like, we'll shut down a meth lab, but prescribe all the kids meth in the form of Adderall or Ritalin to manage their restlessness in a classroom.
Right.
There's so much hypocritical stuff around this. I'd much rather see someone using meth recreational than see a bunch of kids doped up on Adderall.
I agree. Let me just finish a couple more minutes, and there's one more thing that comes into this thing, and then we'll kind of tie this part of it up anyways. But there was just one more thing I wanted you to hear about.
For a police operation with your country, which is why we don't run them, which is why the seizure statistics are so low, because we don't even try to work with Canada, because your laws are abbreviated and distorted. And I think this is an issue that goes back in Canadian history a long time. You need to update your legal structures. And if you do, and create a Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO, like we have in the United States, and designate them as terrorists, which you're going to do, I think we'll solve a lot of these problems. I think terrorists will come off, and we'll be in an excellent position to be partners to stop this stuff from terrorizing our country. I mean, our countries are getting killed by fentanyl. We got to protect ourselves.
So I just want to end on this. You just said if we do these things, the tariffs won't. Well, they're not on, but they won't go on. I mean, do you believe that this is about fentanyl for the president, or that it's about other things? This is just one of the pieces that he is using as leverage here.
Well, I take him literally, and I think literally he says it's about fentanyl, and I think it is. I mean, we're losing 80 to 100,000 people in North America between the U.S. and Canada. We got to stop this nonsense.
Actually, it might have already been at the beginning. I wasn't quite paying attention, but I think it mentioned about the TD Bank, right? Yeah. Actually, sorry, my bad. So that was actually at the very beginning. So the thing that I take from this is, once again, and of course, I'm glad to get your perspective too, because there's a myriad of ways of how to think about this. But to me, like, I look at it as if you're just the average pleb in Canada, right, and you think that you need the state, right, you need government to manage like the drug trade, money laundering, all like TD is literally one of the big fives in this country who've been basically functioning as the lending arm of some of these organized crime. And once again, I'm not saying, to me, government is organized crime, but at the bare minimum for me, especially thinking at it from my libertarian mindset, is it should at least pull back the curtains and reveal the facade of like that you need government to protect you from what? The drug or money laundering. We're seeing this all happens. It's all happening, right? Yeah. Right out and underneath their noses, whether you like it or not. So for those of like you or I, or someone, whether in Canada, US, and especially prior to legalization and stuff, who might have got locked up and put away for having a couple ounces of weed, or you're like, what I mean, and penalized, or someone like myself who had a few beers on my four-wheeler and had my whole life turned upside down. Well, you got to do it because these laws are to protect us. Like, well, but this is the thing: when you use the state as the apparatus, it's the most foolish thing ever, because these revelations prove that we have big giant states with big giant law enforcement apparatus. We got spies, like we got CSIS, and yet it's not your little lowly dude. It's not the dude, like it's not what's his name fucking selling dope out of his apartment, Matthew in apartment 5B. Like these guys, and it all happens like basically with the tacit support of some of the biggest corporations in this country. So if you're advocating or lobbying in any way for government to protect you from any of these things, I mean, how many examples, right, do you need before you realize, well, maybe they're not actually there to do what they claim to do. They actually want to be that organization. And the reason why they'll attack anyone else outside them, because as we all know, government wants to be that monopoly. And if someone's cutting into their action, right?
Well, I mean, that's just it. I mean, this whole thing, the reeks of hypocrisy, right? It's like, God forbid, 100,000 people kill themselves voluntarily by injecting, this thing, but maybe it's by accident. But obviously, people who are habitually using fentanyl are killing themselves either slowly or quickly, right? I mean, they can't stand this world, and they voluntarily. The rest of us, on the other hand, who want to keep living, who would never inject fentanyl in our veins, while we have to take the big pharma brand. Oh, by the way, big pharma, you could argue, is the one that got everyone hooked on these opiates in the first place, but yet they're not designated terrorists. They're not designated, no, there are partners in a healthy livestock, right? It's I don't know. It's just, it's mind blowing. Oh, and the architect of Operation Warp Speed and the injection of all these fentanyl is concerned about people medicating themselves with fentanyl. It's a little bit rich for me.
And it's another example of just basically rule by 80. Because we'll just call them terrorists, because if you call someone terrorist, well, it gives us these abilities to do things, right? To even step up our tyranny.
So we can just absolve due process, right? It's like, okay, I don't know the rationale behind letting someone know that we're tapping your phone, or that the government's tapping your phone, or whatever. But hey, I would appreciate a call if my phone number is being targeted. That seems like a good protection for me against government overreach, which there's been a fuckload of. And so now you're complaining about we don't have enough mechanisms for government overreach in Canada. We need more governments for government overreach. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to take that seriously.
Yeah, it seems like Sinico's not a fan of the RICO laws. It doesn't seem like. I'm not familiar with that stuff, to be honest with you. Like those types of laws, I usually don't get into those things. I like to think of things a little different than just getting. I'm not a lawyer.
I don't know much about them either. All I know is just kind of surface level stuff. I hear libertarian podcasters from the States talk about the abuses of powers under those RICO laws and the abuse of civil liberties and stuff like that. So,
right.
I don't know enough about them to have a formed opinion, but
So what are your thoughts now? Because I would imagine this is going to be, if Trump does, so this is supposed to be, I guess, March 12th. And I don't know, because the way Trump functions is, and I suppose that is literally the art of the deal. And no matter who you're negotiating with, because you just don't know where he's going with it next. But I can't imagine at this point, right, that you could possibly get away. Could he get away with doing another, pulling it back, like, because there's only so many times you can cry wolf, and he obviously knows this, right? But now with this 25% tariff on aluminum steel, which is, I think that's going to have a pretty profound effect on things for sure, if it does come to fruition. But when it comes, do you think that this is something that actually is going to happen? Do you believe that we're actually going to go into what I would perceive as how it's going to work? Is this, once again, this continuation of the race to the bottom? And I think what it does is it benefits both of our government's coffers in some degree. I think and in the way Trump talks about these things is, you use that money, like government takes all that money that you're getting in tariffs, and then you can squander however you see fit. But do you think that this is a ploy? Is it part of the deal, or do you think these tariffs are actually going to come to fruition, and they're actually going to do because they're not going to invade Canada militarily? Do you think it's as a means, because they have the ability, the Americans, even all their income? So Americans have surpassed Canadians, and I'm sure most of the audience realize that they've really gone past in terms of their average wages in almost every sector of the economy now. So if you're doing the pain thing, and because a lot of their stuff, they still have a fairly sizable, industrial part of their country. Is this just to basically, they're willing to put through, do you think that Americans are even at this point just willing to put up with the pain of what this might bring, because they see on the other side of that silver lining that Trump is promising, that if you just hold out long enough, if you just take enough pain, trust me, the Canadians, the pain will hit them much, much worse, and they'll eventually fold. And if that's the case, if that's the goal, is what is the folding going to actually entail? Are we once again back to this thing? Do you think it's going to be something where it ends up being some kind of a formal or informal kind of economic union without actually being an actual state? Because the other thing on the other side of this that I'll point out, that other people have pointed out to me as well, my American friends, is, there's a lot of Canadians like myself is like, that's a better plantation. But there's a lot of Americans, especially the big red states and the Republicans, like, we don't want you fucking socialist part of our country. It was hard enough to fucking beat the Democrats as it is, right?
Right. Well, and that's what I've been saying. I'm like, you really want another California as part of your union? You think that's going to help your country out there? It's like, no, I think Trump, I mean, he's a real estate guy, right? And he's looking at this as terms of real estate, and he's looking at our real estate's pretty valuable. And it's like, how can we get some more of that? How can we get a better deal for the US with all those resources up there, just being untouched and just mired in socialist bureaucratic quagmire? Like you look at the Ring of Fire, for example, in Ontario, and all the billions and trillions of dollars under the ground there in precious metals and rare earth metals and stuff. And Trump's probably, and you look at all the water we have. I mean, we've got enough to drown 8 billion people. We have like 8 billion lethal doses of water up here that the US want to get their hand on. Like, I just think Trump, and he's mentioned this before in terms of like the California's water problems and stuff like that, and talking about all the water Canada has. I've heard him, I think it was on the Joe Rogan podcast. So I think that's kind of how he's looking at it. I don't know in the end whether what he's doing will be good for the US or not. I do admire his decisiveness and his willingness to take strong action. I like, but if you look at the markets, it's like, okay, if I'm a company in Canada that is used to doing business with US companies, I now have a very uncertain playing field. I don't know how to business plan. I don't know how to, now I'm going to be not looking at the US anymore. I'm going to be looking at other countries or internal trade, and Canada may ultimately become more economically protectionist or nationalist because of that. And the US certainly is going to lose a bunch of trade, I would suspect, because of it. And I don't think Trump's economic philosophy of producing everything within the US borders is a very realistic one. I mean, why would they make things like for 10 times the price when that you can trade for it somewhere else and, use your labor to do something else with it, So I don't know if this will be good for because it's just so uncertain. As long as you have Trump in there could be a tariff any second, right? Yeah. Whether he actually pulls the trigger or not, you have to be thinking, if you're a responsible business owner, about that and being like, well, how the hell do I, and look, my solution, if I were prime minister, would be the exact opposite of what they're doing. I would say we're ending all tariffs right now. We are creating economic free zones in Canada, where there will be 0% corporate tax rate. We'll be inviting businesses from around the world in the US to set up shop here and produce in Canada. And, we'll just focus on making our country better rather than punching our people in the face to, hopefully leverage the US.
Kind of like the melee approach, right?
Well, yeah. And I think that would maybe put some pressure on the US, because if they start bleeding business because Canada is a better place to do business, why wouldn't they smarten up with their economic policies as well, right?
Right. Well, that's the thing. One thing we will see, and it's kind of lucky that it's kind of happening at the same time, is we have a libertarian down in Argentina who's trying a little bit a different way, which is the opposite thing. Like, it's doing more or less what you're saying, which is just freeing things up, allowing more market competition, allowing, and getting rid of less or major apparatuses of the state. So we'll see how these experiments obviously play out. But one more thing, Tim, I won't keep you too much longer, my friend, but I did want one other thing to cover there today before we do. And I put this as the cover photo there for our interview, because the clown show. Well, every circus got to have a carny, right? And we actually genuinely have a fucking carny. It happens to be, this is the hilarious part, how the media is talking about carny as this outsider. It's so funny because, we, especially those of us that are libertarians, not only do we understand the Federal Reserve, but, the Bank of Canada, which is Canada's central bank. And Mark Carney, this is the Keynesian guy. And I mean, if you just listen to some of the rhetoric, read his book or anything for that matter, and he's not a he loathes capitalism, like what he calls our capitalism. But it's, as libertarian, the first thing you'll point out is, where's this capitalism? I mean, there's a little tiny bit of it down here, but you guys only leave a little bit just because that's how socialists, you'll go broke in a moment if you don't allow any economic activity to flurry in the market, right? But in reality, these guys are all Keynesians, they're all central planners, they're all collectivists. And not only was Mark Carney the banker, the central banker in Canada, under Harper, for crying out loud. So that's another thing that's so funny is the Liberals want to bring the guy on, right? It's like, but don't you guys hate the cons? Well, him and Harper were pretty close because Harper appointed him. And it was also him and Harper for the cons who like to think that, oh yeah, they're the free market guys. Well, guess what? It was Carney and Harper together that bailed out all these big banks, including the TD, and forced Canadians to do so, which sustain that big giant housing market bubble that's fucked a lot of our younger generations out of the housing market, whereas Americans, they bailed out a couple of their banks, but they let some of that correction take place, which gave their successive generations the ability to at least get a foot in the market for a while. It's going back up again, of course, but at least there was a temporary reprieve, whereas in Canada, it was they bailed them out, they reported on it once, and they just pretended like nothing ever happened. And we see in the housing market just get to the point where it's just, I mean, it's devastating, as you know, for the young people. And this is the guy that's responsible, and this is the guy that the Liberals are rolling out that's going to be the savior for Canadians. And it's mind-numbing. But yeah, what's your thoughts on some of this insanity with this Carney the clown here?
Well, I mean, Carney worries me. Initially, I was thinking, I really hope Carney wins the leadership race because I see him as the most dangerous guy. Yeah. And I want him to be another Kim Campbell, 6 months and gone. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure that's going to happen anymore looking at the polls.
Right.
Now I'm worried he might stick around. And just listening to normies talk around work and stuff, I'm like, I brought up the fact that he's a central banker and he believes in, like he's the most establishment guy you can get. If you read his book Values, I could barely get through the introduction. He's talking about how gold-backed money creates boom bust cycles, and he's talking about value, like share or stakeholder capitalism, which is not the owners having a say, but having people who have no skin in the game have a say. In other words, environmental groups and all these crazy, like it's all the DEI woke stuff and green globalism and stuff like that, right? That he promotes. But what this guy said is, well, Canada did better than most other countries in the crash in 2008, 2009. And that was because Carney kept interest rates higher on the central bank than others, right? So I just listened to this and I'm like normies view Carney as the adult in the room who has experience running the economy, who is like the sober adult compared to Poliver, and who seems like a bit of a petulant, schmarmy child. And so, I'm starting to worry a little bit because, I see Carney as far more dangerous than Trudeau or any other politician in Canada. This is the darling of the Liberals right now, and he's swaying a lot of Canadians over to the Liberal Party. So I don't know. It worries me.
The narrative is selling well, and like you say, especially for that, and it's a large contingent, it's a large cohort of the people on the left that would be very low information voters. But like you're saying there, Tim, is Trudeau, right? I mean, whether it's Trudeau, Freeland, Climate Barbie, I mean, the people that ended up being surrounded Trudeau is, that was not just the B team. Like we were talking scraping the bottom, because anyone that was competent within his fucking organization, within the Liberals, he kicked to the curb, or anyone that challenged him anyway. We've seen how that played out for the whole 9 years. And Trudeau himself, as much as he definitely has some tyrannical tendencies, and the fact that you heard him talk about now they can go real fucking, I forget what the particular word he used, but, he could have been much more dangerous. And Trudeau was a danger to Canadians, especially during COVID with the mandates and stuff. But at least his incompetence, his lack of that kind of prowess that someone like Mark Carney has, right? And even someone like Chrystia Freeland, none of the other up and comers, the challengers for leadership race, are anything, as far as I'm concerned, on any level compared to like your Mark Carneys of the world in terms of, can be a real fucking genuine threat to us, because he's got the connections. He does have the that reputation. He was the former banker, so he kind of does know things from the inside out. Trudeau barely, I don't know, budgets balance himself. Like I say, Trudeau, yeah, he was a threat, but he was a threat from a guy that, you know, was more or less all about his ego and narcissism and just, you know, enjoying the praise, right? Whereas Carney, he's a different breed right there. And I'm like you, I'm on your side there. Is if he does end up coming in here, this is it's not going to bode well.
He's very intelligent, and he has the hubris to back it up, right? I mean, it runs so deep in him. I can't imagine, like, he just believes that his hand is required to centrally control everything, right? Yeah. What's needed is an elite intelligentsia. And I mean, the liberals eat that shit up. They're like, oh yeah, science. Ooh, yeah. Reason, evidence, progress, rationality. That's, you know, and never mind that they are the biggest statist in the world. And there's no rationale or reason or evidence that can back up their belief in this non-corporeal entity called the state, and where it gets all its rights to do these things. But I mean, it is scary.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously he would be in the position too, because I don't even think he's like, you know, like Trudeau will just flow around whatever the winds blow kind of thing, I guess, at certain degrees. Whereas Carney, like, he is, for all the people that are worried about globalism and you know, just growing things to the point where it's just like central planning on the global scale, right? That's the part like that I think is something that is within Mark Carney's purview, and that's the kind of thing he promotes. I don't think he cares about Canada. Canada, for these kind of guys, we're just numbers on a spreadsheet for someone like him, right? And those are the people, when you get that far removed from people, and because he is the genuine type of elitist, the guy is someone that's so far, those are the people that, like I say, can be. Trudeau cares enough about his reputation, right? Mark Carney thinks his reputation is rock solid no matter what he does, because he's been parading around talking about this shit and getting it swallowed up and sunk, people soaking up hook, line, and sinker. And he feels quite comfortable in that position. And he's got quite a team of people around the world that's willing to kind of give him the benefit of the back him, right? So, anyways,
I'm with Dankus Mimicus here, who says he'd like to see the Indian model win the Liberal leadership. Yeah. She seems to be the most based.
Yeah, she's doing some actually pretty good trolling there, I've noticed, right? She's been doing some pretty good trolling on Trudeau, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and Sinico says Alberta needs a Heinlein government. Service guarantees citizenship, and civilians can just live their lives. Yeah, Heinlein had some good, you know, I think I invented this term recently.
Robert Heinlein you talking about, right?
Yeah, Robert Heinlein, the sci-fi writer. He was a hardcore libertarian. Yeah. Great quotes too by him. Yeah. The thing I've been thinking about more and more is this idea. I don't know if anyone else is coining the term, but I'm calling it anarcho-nationalism, which is forming voluntary nations, right? And I don't know if you've read, there's this book out there by Balaji Siver. I can't remember, some Indian dude, very smart dude. He wrote a book called The Network State. And in the book, he talks about forming these parallel nations to what we have now, right? And it starts with networks and cryptography. He talks about the 7 different stages, and what you can do is imagine getting together with like-minded people. Like during COVID, it might be you know, an anti-vax community or a community who doesn't want to accept the mandates, and forming a network and having citizenship in this network, and maybe there's a fee for citizenship or something like that. And you know, you can start to buy real estate. You know, you can do like mutual aid. So if one of your citizens is attacked by the state, a court case or something like that, you can fundraise, and you can, you know, you can come together. A group of people can fend off predators, right? And that's the benefit of having a nation. And then eventually you grow big enough and you have enough of a real estate footprint that you can get recognized as a sovereign nation, essentially, and internationally. So that this was his idea. But I more and more I like that idea, right? Rather than constantly pushing back against evil, just build a separate thing that isn't based on evil and grow it.
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the best ideas anyone can do because, yeah, the tearing it down, it just seems like an extreme waste of resources to tear anything down. Is just use that resource and build things up. But the one thing we can take advantage, I think, now for whether you're talking with the person you're talking about or others and all the other ideas that we've bantered about in past live streams and all the other libertarians, whether in Canada, US, or anywhere, is one thing we can do, actually, I just thought of now, is take advantage of the one good thing that Trump does when he's down there in power is he's the master at getting everyone's attention. And you know what? When the attention is focused on Orange Man, yeah, this is a perfect and prime example for those who, don't really want to play into politics or that stuff. Is, yeah, this is the time while they're distracted worrying about Orange Man. Yeah, start building those communities. Start, coming together, in groups in your community and talking about these things, because this is how every example throughout history is. People have to find ways outside of the state, which they always have, like the Underground Railroad or whatever, and just put those great minds and those resources to good use and figure some of these things out, because that's, I think, what's going to help. I don't think that Trump's our savior. I don't think anyone that's going to come to power in Canada, even if it was the great Tim Moen himself, is never going to save us, folks. So don't ever think that way. We got to save ourselves. And like I say, while everyone's distracted, the media, the pundits, and the politicians, and all these people, while they're distracted for the next 4 years, spend that time to reach out, build communities, build areas where you have connections all over the country, like any place, and figure out what we can do. Because one thing we can say in the modern, not just information age, but we actually now, like, I love the fact that we actually even have the means of the people that want to take over the communists. Well, guess what? Capitalists have already built it to the point where we can take over the means of production, but you can buy it at your local store, right? 3D printers. No, but there's a myriad of ways where people can find ways to come together and try to help do these things. And that's the way I think it has to happen anyways, is we can't rely on Trump or government to be our way out of the state, right? Or to advance liberty. We can, whatever messaging they can send, or any areas, like I say, if we can join forces in the odd time to help someone like Ross or to create a Doge, fine. But there's a lot of work that's still got to be done yet, and most of it's going to take the place out of the limelight, out of the spotlight, and just in our own backyards, right, Tim?
Well, that's it. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do now, is just filter out the noise that's coming at me from social media and the media, mainstream media, and focus on my own family and my own life, and seeing what I can do within my sphere of influence to improve things for myself and my community, those that that I have relationships with, right? And I don't know, that's kind of, to me, is the only thing. And so I focus on the things that I have control over, and let the winds of change keep blowing out there.
Yeah. Well, now I'm going to have a double whammy on the feeling guilty, because not only did I pull you away from your medical thing, but you've been trying to avoid all this stuff all along. I drag you right back. But I really genuinely, it's been a while, and I miss talking to you, Tim, and I know you're always, and you proved the point once again that you're always a good voice of reason, and I like having these conversations. And I trust me, I won't try to make it too much of a habit, because I understand. I actually went through a little bit of time myself, because I think every one of us, you do got to focus on your family. I mean, that's got to be that's got to be the most important thing, because that's where your life, that's where you draw your meaning. That's the things that are most important to us. So yeah, you can do your thing on your side, in terms of you want to activate or get active or involved in politics or activism and stuff. But yeah, make the focus, because only you can live your life, and you have to live in your own head. And if there's times where you need to take a little time for a reprieve, I have, like I say, and it's helped me tremendously. And I think you have as well. And I'm glad that you did. And like I say, if you don't mind, maybe we'll have another chat, but I'll leave it for a little while, give you some time there, and
listen, I still love, I mean, look, it's a calling for me to get big ideas out into the world. And
for sure.
I think that's important. Yeah, it's just that, the like having your happiness tied to a certain outcome that you can't control is I think a recipe for for mental illness, quite
Yeah.
frankly.
Yeah,
And so I see that a lot, right? People just fighting, always
Yeah.
angry, always. There's no shortage of that if you want it. So,
No.
trying to be a happy warrior is where I'm at, and
Yeah.
fighting fights locally that I can win is where I've tended to be focused on now. But that doesn't mean I'm not interested in getting big ideas out to the world either.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's great, Tim. And like, I think that's great advice, and great advice even for all the folks that will watch this live stream. Is I know we all get, a little bit, emotionally laden with some of the craziness going on. And these propagandists have a really good way of getting in your head at times and getting you upset and aggravated. But yes, once again, just like what Tim was mentioning, and I was saying, we got to deal with our own situations. And actually, we're no good to anyone else if we're not taking care of ourselves. Really, we got to take care of ourselves first and foremost. So I want all you folks in the chat, same thing. Even if I end up having a smaller audience as a consequence, you guys have taken some time to, keep your head straight. Because I know it's hard to get away from things. You kind of get stuck in it. You feel like you're reaching out in the community. But yeah, you got to take care of yourself and your mental health. Tim doing that, and you folks do that for yourself. Anyways, I'll tie this live stream up there, Tim. Like I say, I really appreciate it, unless there's anything else that you wanted to say there. Or
no, just thanks. It's good to see you still doing this, and it's always a pleasure to talk. So I'll be happy to come on anytime.
Right on, Tim. All right, buddy. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk to you again, my friend. And you, everyone in the chat, have a good day too. This is Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.